Jessica McCallum. I'm a civil engineer and I work for Kimley Horn, and I've been there for about 4.5 years now.
Perfect. And how did you first become interested in your career?
So I actually took a class at Coronado that was an AutoCAD class, and it was drafting, and I can't remember the teacher's name anymore. He also taught a woodshop class, but when I took that, and then I took a computer programming class with Mr. Grabowski, I think is his name. And they both told me, they're like, you should really look into engineering. You really like this stuff. And so that was kind of how I wanted to start engineering, but I didn't know, I guess, which path I wanted to go in engineering. I just kind of knew that that was something that I was interested in. So from high school, just the typical classes, I took some classes that I could have transfer over to college, but that I was going to do that regardless of what degree I got. And then in college, I was in general engineering, then I went to computer engineering, then I went to environmental engineering, then I went to civil engineering. So I kind of did the typical college progression of you don't know what you want to do. And so I did 4.5 years undergraduate, and then just recently I took my professional engineering exam that you have to take after 4 years of working underneath a professional engineer. And then you take an exam, and then you can sign up to get your certification. So basically that gives me the ability to stamp plans, and when I stamp plans, that basically means that the construction documents or the plans I produce can actually be built. So until I have my stamp, I'd have to use my supervisor's stamp or someone else in the office, because once we produce plans, unless they have that stamp on there, we can't give to a contractor or a client to actually build the plans. It'll be illegal basically if they try to build without a stamp. So now I have that. So total, it's 8 years, 4 years undergrad, getting your degree, and then 4 years working underneath a professional engineer. So I work more so in consulting. So consulting, it's still within engineering, but it's a little bit different in terms of, I would say you get a lot more face time with clients, and also with people that work in the city and different governmental, positions. So that's what I really like about this side of engineering, because I wouldn't say I'm the quote-unquote engineer who likes to sit behind a computer screen and not talk to anyone during the day. Like, I really like to talk with others and collaborate and work together. So I think in terms of just engineering, when you do the design side of things, I think personality traits, you have to be really organized, you have to be very driven, but then on the consulting side of things, you have to be able to hold a conversation pretty well with someone. That's not to say that if you go into consulting, you need to know how to do that right off the bat. It's definitely something that our company puts a lot of emphasis on. So we have to work really hard and do trainings to, I guess, be kind of personable and not be that quote-unquote engineer that people think of being a little bit stiff and rigid, and maybe a little bit antisocial, I think is what a lot of people think engineers are like. And so the consultant side gives the engineers who want to be a little bit more outgoing and vocal, it gives them kind of that outlet. Well, the typical starting salary, at least when I started 4.5 years ago, was about $55,000 to $60,000 for civil engineering. And in terms of growth, I mean, it's kind of sky's the limit. Once you get your professional engineering license, that's when it kind of opens the floodgates to really increase your salary, depending on how many projects you want to manage, if you want to start your own company, if you want to go, in a different career in terms of construction management. But I'd say probably for a professional engineer, it starts then to be about $80,000 to $85,000 as an average. And then there's some people in our company now who have been there 15, 20 years that are, easily in the six figures. So I do work in the office. We have the ability to be remote, which is nice. So I think obviously COVID changed things a lot. And so now our company has done a lot to where that allows people to be remote as well. So that's great. It gives me a chance to do something like this interview where I can work remote and I can take some time off during the day. So I work primarily in the office. My company, it's actually really nice, is very young. So I would say I'm 27 and I am in the median age range at our company. I think the oldest person who's in our office is 36 maybe, and they're managing multi-million-dollar projects. So it's definitely a great work environment. It's a lot younger. I know that's not the case for all engineering. You definitely get a little bit of an older group, but I do think it's kind of starting to phase out a little bit. There was, at least from what I've heard, is that there was a big gap for a while there for about 20, 25 years where a lot of people weren't going into engineering, or it was a lot smaller of a group. So you had a lot older people in a company, and then the gap was like 20 years, and then you'd have new hires. Now we're kind of on a 10 to 15 year trend where there's a lot of new hires from college, and so it's definitely starting to trend down where it's a lot younger of a group, especially in civil engineering. And it's also a lot, I would say civil engineering has a lot more females in it as well. I don't know the reasoning behind that, but there's a lot more females, so it's really diverse. And in terms of the hours a week, it is consulting in any industry. You're going to work a little bit longer. I think it's more, I don't really look at how many hours I work. I look more at what I produce in a week and how many submittals I can get out or how many tasks I can complete. So, you know, there's some weeks I'll work 55 hours. There's some weeks that I'll work just a set 40, but I would say I probably average 45 hours, 47 hours, which isn't, at least in my opinion, too bad for consulting and for what I get paid to do. So when you start out, typical day, so I work in private land development primarily, so that consists of, I don't do any design with a building, so that's all architectural engineers. That's not what I do, but basically I'll get a footprint from an architectural engineer. So one of my big clients is McDonald's. So I'll get a footprint from the architect who works with the McDonald's, and it'll be a prototypical building. McDonald's will tell me, hey, we want to look at this vacant lot, you know, maybe East Colorado Springs. We're doing one at Woodman and Mark Scheffel. So it's just a vacant lot, and they said, you know what, we want to use this building, place it on this lot, and make it work to where we meet all city requirements. So that will consist of like parking requirements. So for restaurants, you normally have to park one stall per 100 square feet of a building, or they'll make you do it like one stall per 5 seats sitting in the actual restaurant. So we have to make sure we're meeting parking, we're meeting landscaping requirements, we're meeting setbacks from the roads. You can't put a building obviously right up next to a road. It has to be set back. So I'll do all of that research. And then it's kind of like almost like a canvas for me to paint on, where I just, in Civil 3D AutoCAD, I plop down this building and I make it work. And I figure out how the whole site is gonna look. So if you look, for instance, like maybe like a King Soopers or a Walmart, you know, you have your parking lot, you have your sidewalk connections, you have your low points where the drainage, all the flow is gonna go to, you have your landscaping where your trees. So basically that's like the finished product that I produce. So in an average day, a lot of it is producing either conceptually or the actual plans that we can then give to a contractor to go out there and build it. I would say benefits, the biggest thing is probably the flexibility. It's a very flexible job, at least where I work right now, and I think that's in engineering in general, is pretty flexible. And so I'm able to, in this career, have a good work-life balance, which might be different than what some engineers will say, but I think if you prioritize, you know, things that you want to do outside of work, this is a really good career for that, because you can have so much flexibility with your schedule of what you want to do. So I think that's the benefit. I have not had to change, I guess, my way of life and things that I love to do in terms of travel and, you know, going out to dinner with friends or leaving, you know, on a Friday to go for a weekend trip. These are all things I used to do before I was in the working world, and I'm still able to do. So I would say that's definitely a benefit. I think the challenge is probably, honestly, technically, it's a very technical degree. It's difficult. It's a lot of science. It's a lot of math. So when you first start out, it's almost like kind of being in school again, where you're having to learn a lot of things for the first time. You're kind of teaching yourself, but you also have mentors to help you. But on the flip side of that, I feel like, you know, some will argue, well, this math class, I'm never going to use what I learned in this class. Whereas, you know, when you actually are in the career and you're learning heavy math and science, it is stuff you're going to use. So at least you don't feel like, quote unquote, wasting your time to learn it. But it's challenging. It's definitely technically challenging. I definitely think it is compatible. You know, I think that comes down more towards, I guess in my experience, the company you work for, not so much what you end up doing. You know, if you have a company, especially being a female, if you have a company that puts a lot of emphasis on being able to help working moms and retaining working moms, I think that's huge, and that's something that anyone in any profession should look for when they graduate. Guy or girl should look for that, and if your company doesn't put an emphasis on that, it's not a red flag, but it's probably not somewhere you're going to stay when you end up, you know, having a family. So I think it's more so the company rather than what you actually go to in your profession. But in terms of the flexibility and being able to work remote, I definitely think it is. That's a hard one. I think probably my favorite aspect is just the people that I get to work with. I get to work with people that work in all different aspects of basically a community and community planning. So, you know, I get to work with planners from the city of Colorado Springs or the city of Brighton or Denver, and then getting to work with you know, contractors and clients of, you know, clients that are for McDonald's or local developers. Like I just have been able to meet a lot of different people who are all very successful, but have gone about it in very different ways, and all have a certain, I guess, niche and slot in like what they do for a community. And so just being able to be a part of that and seeing how what I do can benefit others has been awesome, and has been a really good like growing opportunity for me. So I think civil engineering, I think on the public side of things, so more so like roadways and infrastructure, that's never going to change. I think there's always going to need to be upgrades, and especially in Colorado as we grow more, it's going to get a lot busier. Private side of things, I think the same as well. I think where I see a lot of changes are more so the technology. So we can go out to a site. Some really cool technology that they're developing right now is that if I develop something on my computer screen, I can go out there with a tablet and I can pop it up 3D and look at a site, and then I can just turn with my tablet looking at it, and it'll pop up, you know, what it's actually going to look like on my screen. So, you know, if I have a building over there and then I want to have, you know, a nice park here, I can actually with my design go out and look at it and see what it's going to look like. And so that's something that's going to be really cool and help a lot in the construction industry as well too, because you can show basically a contractor who hasn't been on the whole design side of things, hey, this is how it's supposed to look. And then it's just going to make projects go a lot smoother. So I think the technology side of things is really going to help. And then also using like the same kind of angle of that is using drones a lot. Drones to survey an area, we've actually done one where they wanted to redo a good chunk of Larimer Square in Denver. And so our team in Kimley Horn, they flew drones, because you can't go and survey and go into each of these buildings. But what they did is they flew drones in Larimer Square and got all this data of the buildings around, and then also flew and like could see in the windows, obviously they asked, but could see in the windows, and then they could develop a model in this whole video stream of all the updates that could be done. And it was all done with drones. So it's definitely like the technology is crazy. I'm sure there's stuff that like I don't even know about that's even better than that, but that's where I kind of see it changing too. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to not be intimidated. Like, I think when you hear engineering, I think a lot of people think, you know, math, science, and if that's something they struggle with, or that's not their, you know, number one strong suit, but they're still really interested in doing engineering, to just go ahead and try it, you know? Like, and if you're in college, and I'm the first one to say, if you spend a year doing something in college that maybe is not for you, then switch it up. I mean, obviously that gets tough with money and you know, and other things, but once you're out of college, it's a lot harder to change your career path than when you're in college. So if someone's intimidated by it, but it sounds interesting, just go ahead and take that leap and try it. I think engineering comes in so many different forms, and especially with the consulting side for someone who is a lot more social. I like doing design, but I like more of the day-to-day facial interactions. I kind of got the best of both worlds when I didn't know that beforehand. So I think just go for it and try your best, and if you don't end up liking it, that's fine too.